Action. Hello, I want to begin by introducing myself, Krista Johansson, Chapter Chair for Moms for Liberty, Walton County. And this is Jolene Jasharek, Vice Chair, sitting next to me. She will be our timekeeper this evening. Across from us are our Walton County School Board candidates. Please hold your applause for the end. From left to right, we have Mr. Bill Edens, the incumbent from District 3, Mr. Jason Catalano, the incumbent for District 4, District 5, Mr. Gordon Porter, candidate running for District 3, Mrs. M.H. Carr, candidate running for District 5. Before we begin our introductions and debate, I wanted to thank each one of you for coming to participate in the forum tonight. I know this is a time sacrifice for yourself and your families, so from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of Moms for Liberty, thank you to each of you for being here tonight. We will begin our questioning and move from left to right. Each of you will have 2 minutes to respond. Jolene will be our timekeeper. At 1:30, she will show you the blue side of the paddle. At 10 seconds remaining, she will turn the paddle to the red side. And at 2 minutes, she will start to wave. So please stop talking. And we will continue in this fashion until all 4 candidates have had a chance to answer. For the following question, and then the last person that talked will be the first person to begin the next question. Do we have any questions? All right, let's begin, shall we? We will start with Mr. Edens with the first question. In your own words, what is the base? Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted you to introduce yourselves first. So we will not begin with the questions yet. I wanted you to introduce yourselves first. Thank you. So Mr. Edens, and then from left to right, 1 minute, just a brief introduction.
Thank you, Ms. Johansson. And thank you all for coming, being here tonight. It's a little warm, but we have a breeze blowing, so I think we can stand it. And I would like to thank Moms for Liberty for having this podcast so that we can come out and you can get better educated. My name is Bill Edens, Jr. I am the current school board member for District 3. When I became a board member, we had one school that had an agricultural program with no teachers. Now we have 6 schools that offer agricultural or aquacultural programs. The first year I was here, fewer than 7 students earned certificates of technical education. This past school year, over 2,000 students
And that's a minute.
were awarded certificates of technical education. I appreciate you letting me introduce myself. I am Bill Edens, Jr., and I would appreciate your consideration and your vote on August the 23rd.
Mr. Catalano.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Moms for Liberty, for hosting this. Thank you all for coming out and giving us your time for this opportunity to get to know each other. I'm Jason Catalano. I've been the school board member for District 5. My wife and I, we have 4 kids. They're in high school, middle school, and elementary school. We are invested in our school system and want to make sure that our kids have the best educational opportunities that we can provide to them, and want to make sure that all of our students in Walton County have that same experience. We were ranked 35th in the state. We are currently ranked 3rd in the state now with school assessments and school grades. Our graduation rate when I was elected was 68%. We are currently over 91% of graduation rate. We've worked really hard to change the culture of Walton County to make sure that we continue to put children first, that we make decisions that are best geared for our students. And that is my time. So I'm Jason Catalano, District 5. Please vote August 23rd. Thank you.
Mr. Porter.
All right, well, I appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak to you guys for a little bit. Appreciate the Moms for Liberty for putting on the forum. I gotta say, this is the coolest forum I think we've had so far. It is really pretty swanky. I like it. And I mean, it's really great. This is what the American Republic is all about, right? Spending time with your neighbors, swatting mosquitoes, and talking politics. So it is a really cool place. I am Gordon Porter, running for District 3 for Walton County School Board. Right now, it is no secret, our country right now is being faced with every unimaginable threat to our schools that we could have perceived 10 years ago. Everything from critical race theory to gender identity politics, and the hornet's nest is getting bigger every 6 months, it seems like. Right now, it is more critical than ever in our history to have somebody on our local school board that is willing to say no and do it with moral conviction and with absolute truth embedded in them. And I think anything other than that is unacceptable. And that's my time. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr.
Hi, I'm MH Carr. I'm running for school board for District 5. I have been married for 18 years to Matthew Carr. He's in the back. Lived in Walton County for 15 years, and I have one son in the Walton County School District. I graduated from Ole Miss with a Bachelor of Business Administration in MIS, which means I'm a computer nerd. I'm running for school board because it all started with my son. I'm a very active parent. I have run every single parent organization at every school that my child has gone to. What makes me qualified for the job? I was the executive director of the Walton Education Foundation for the last 6 years, and before that I was a volunteer there for 4 years. I'm very involved, and if you're not familiar with the Walton Education Foundation, they provide scholarships, grants, school-wide grants, district-wide grants across Walton County. Ultimately, I'm a mom, and I have the time and energy and passion to do the job. And lastly, I'd like to say, I brought the sex education handbook that I found in my son's backpack, and this is unacceptable, and if you haven't read it and you would like to, please come see me afterwards.
All right, first question. In your own words, what is the basic purpose of the school board? So that means that, Ms. Carr, you'll begin.
Of course, this is totally female versus male. Just want to show y'all, this is how much paperwork I brought. And they're all just sitting here. I'm so jealous of them. It's kind of like having a purse. The basic role of a school board member is
Basic purpose of the school board.
the school board is to create policies and procedures. It's to approve the budget, and it is to hire and fire. Those are the 3 roles that, if you go Google it. But what really is the purpose is to lead, to inspire, to be a contact person for people that don't feel like they're being heard, to help support the teachers that perhaps, like you said earlier, if there wasn't a consortium, I think you called it, to report, people can come to you, you can help direct them to the right places at the school district. I just really think if you can lead and get involved and inspire parental involvement, get everybody communicate with, facilitate partnerships with businesses and other people around the county, just generally being involved and participate, that would be the role of the school board.
And Mr. Edens.
Well, obviously, a paper pencil version of that is to develop policies and rules. But the school board goes much further than that. And we are the intermediary between the public and the school district officials.
Mr. Catalano.
Yeah, so there are specific statutory requirements and responsibilities that a school board member has. It includes setting policy, setting the budget. But as the other candidates have already mentioned, it goes beyond that, right? When anytime a representative, someone that is elected, is to set the standard and to make sure that the environment in which we are given responsibility for is safe for our children, is to make sure that we continue to put children first. I believe that the school board, in a lot of ways, is standing at the gate, and what influences come into our school district. And that's something that I've believed from before I ran originally, and the same position that I've had for 8 years that I've served in this position is to make sure that what happens outside in our world and the chaos that we see doesn't infiltrate into our classrooms. And that's where, as a father, that's how I view every decision that I make, is how is this going to affect our children? How is this going to affect our teachers? How is this going to affect our taxpayers? And we make sure that what we're doing is in line with the vision that we have as a district, to make sure that our students are given the best opportunities, that they're safe, and that we are increasing and expanding their options and opportunities. We want to invest into our children's lives so that they have options that we didn't have. We want to make sure that they have opportunities to choose what they want to do in life. And I believe that the school board is paramount in setting that environment and setting that culture.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I think honestly, Pastor Longmire, wherever he went, I think he hit the nail on the head earlier. Our job, any public service job, whether that's school board, county commissioner, whatever the case may be, our job is to serve the taxpayer and serve the parent, and also to serve the child. Right now, I think that's more critical than ever to be a defender, and that is part of what that service is about. However, that mindset of a servant, the government does not co-parent with parents. Parents are the parents, parents do the teaching. Government and school boards are supplemental to that. Thank you. So with that, I'll leave it at that. That's as clean as I can make it.
All right, thank you. And that concludes our first question. So Mr. Porter, you'll be the first to answer our second. Who is your favorite founding father and why?
Without a doubt, George Washington. Everything about him, I love him, from his moral conviction to doing what was right when everybody thought it was the wrong thing to do, he did what was right. He is who I want to be when I grow up. And that's how I'll end up with it. Thank you.
Ms. Carr, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I had to do some Googling. Of course, I couldn't go with founding, you said father or mother. I'm going to go with Abigail Adams. She was the second First Lady. She was the wife of John Adams, the mother of John Quincy Adams, and she was an advocate for public education for boys and girls. And she was an early supporter of women's rights and women's education, and she opposed slavery.
And Mr. Eddings.
Benjamin Franklin. He invented things. He was creative to find the right answers, solutions to a problem. That's what we do as school board members. That's what he did. He is my favorite founding father.
And Mr. Catalano.
All right, so this is a tough one for me, because it's like trying to pick like the most amazing person out of a group of the most amazing people. What these men did, what their families did, has impacted the world beyond what they could ever imagine. And I am so grateful for the sacrifice that they made. If I really had it, it's a toss-up between George Washington. I have a book about George Washington, about his rules, like the way that he conducted himself. It's in my office. It wasn't for anybody else. He made sure that this is who I am and this is how I'm going to live my life. And he had a set of rules that he lived by. My other one is Thomas Jefferson. His words in the Declaration of Independence, I believe, set the stage for where we are as a country. And the fact that those men would sign that document and dedicate their lives and their fortunes to the work that was ahead of them is so inspirational. So I named a couple there, but it's that group. I mean, we owe everything to that group of people as a country and as a nation. And it's inspiring, and so I was glad that you guys asked that question. So thank you.
And that takes us to our third question, starting with Mr. Catalano. Who do you believe is the greatest stakeholder in education and why?
Yeah, the greatest stakeholder is parents, right? We have the responsibility to educate the most important person in our world. Our children, they are what, as a parent, it's why you do what you do. And it requires the relationship between the school district and parents and guardians, because not everybody has, right, a parent in their home. And so it's the person who's responsible for that child and we work with them to make sure that we're providing the best service that we can, the best education that we can. We make sure that they're involved. Right? I've got 4 kids. We are involved in our kids' education. We have relationships with our teachers. We make sure that at the beginning of the school year, we set a parent-teacher meeting with them. We introduce ourselves. We get to know them. We ask them to watch our kids and say, hey, what do you see them doing interacting with other kids? What do you see them, how are they reacting to their schoolwork? We want to have that relationship so when there is something that happens, the teachers reach out to us because we've built a relationship with them. And so it's so important to build those relationships, and I believe that we have that as a school district. We understand that parents are parents and that we are not parents. The beautiful part is that our teachers love their students as if they're their own. But we understand that they're not. These are your kids. These are our kids. And so it's that partnership that's so vital and important. And I think that's why we've seen the progress and the success that we've seen over such a short amount of time, because of that strong community involvement and that parent involvement that we have, because we understand the relationship between parents and students and the school district.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. I believe the parents are the greatest stakeholder. How did the question word it? Was it the most important stakeholder?
Who do you believe is the greatest stakeholder in education
Greatest
and why?
stakeholder. Okay, yeah, absolutely the parents. Again, as I said a minute ago, the government does not co-parent with the parents. Your kids are on loan to you from God, so it is your responsibility to make sure that they are taken care of, and it should be an honor to us that you have trusted us to make those decisions on a public stage. It's for you to send your kids to go basically spend the rest of the next 13 years in a public setting. It is a great responsibility for us to make sure that we set things up that the parent can not only be heard, but that their wants and wishes and what they feel their public education should look like, we need to make sure that is what we shape it to look like.
Mrs. Carr?
I agree completely, the parents. So today, since I feel like y'all answered this question so well, today was Emerald Coast Middle School's orientation, and I was there volunteering for the parent organization. And as a parent, I'm standing there trying to get people to volunteer to participate and become involved as parents. Some of these kids had to come up there and their parents didn't speak English, and the child is facilitating that conversation with us, but the parent is still the one that is making the decisions, meeting the teachers, making sure that they're in the right classes, buying the uniforms, and being a parent is such an incredible experience, right? All you moms understand this. So you bring a baby into the world, your whole world changes, and then suddenly you have a million trillion responsibilities. And from what I understand, and from my own experience, it only gets harder as they get older. So parent involvement, parents are the greatest stakeholders. I hope that everybody today goes and volunteers for your parent organization when you leave here, because we all need some extra help.
Mr. Eddings?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that students and parents are the primary stakeholders in education. Students are what we do, and the parents are the ones that help us do it.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next question. For our incumbents, how have you involved your greatest stakeholders? And for our candidates, how do you plan to involve your greatest stakeholders?
Can you repeat the
Yes.
question?
So for our incumbents, how have you involved your greatest stakeholders?
Well, obviously the students, we see them 7-8 hours of the school day in the classrooms actively giving instruction. The parents, we talk to by phone, by email, by texting. They have all of our information on the district website, but that's not enough. You can always do better. We're always planning and looking at adding other ways to help parents stay in communication with us.
Mr. Catalano?
All right, so we live in a country that requires a responsible constituency. And that goes into so many different things. But as parents, you have a responsibility to be involved in your kids' lives. And most parents, we live in an area, in a community that has strong moral values, a strong conservative Christian area. I mean, it's everywhere you go. It's part of the fact that we opened tonight with the pastor from Destiny, who just gave like an amazing sermon, and none of us even realized it. He just preached the word of God to us. Right? That's a reflection of who we are. And so, parents are involved in their kids' lives. They're part of coaching. They're doing homework with their kids. They're working. And life is full of a lot of different things that pull on our attention and our time and resources. And so we work to make sure that we're providing parents all of the information that we can. We have a program called Let's Talk that's available 24/7. There's a phone number that you can text, that it goes directly to one of our district staff if you have a question and you don't know where to go. We've developed a lot of things to try to make sure that we're providing parents with as much information about what's happening in their kids' lives so that they are involved. When they're out doing everything that they're doing, that they don't have to worry about, we're not aware of what our kids are seeing at school or being involved in at school. And so one of the really cool examples of that is during COVID. The amount of work that we did, because we didn't shut down schools. And the amount of effort that went in from our teachers, from our bus drivers, from our cafeteria workers, to make sure that everything was provided to our children and to our families, so that they understood that they had the resources they needed so that they could help their kids during that time when they weren't, when the whole state shut down. And so it's an important part of what we do, and I think we've done a great job. We can always improve, and it's always a work to bring
I see the paddle.
parents into the classroom. But we've done a good job with it. Thank you.
And for our incumbents, how do you plan to involve your greatest stakeholders? Mr. Porter.
So I think there are some very simple things that we could do that on its face maybe seem a little too simple, but I think they could go a really long way. One of which, currently the school board meetings are held at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday. Most parents that I know of cannot make a 5 o'clock meeting on a Tuesday without taking off work. That's a real problem. If we're here to serve you guys and not ourselves or the administration, we need to make it available to you in whatever means possible. Another way to do that is to buy an iPad and an iPad stand and Facebook Live the meeting. How many of you have ever watched the Okaloosa County School Board meetings on Crestview TV, or they have a Facebook page? Okay, not a lot. Okay. And a good lawyer only asks questions that he knows the answer to before he asks them. I've actually been able to watch them several times over the past couple of months on Facebook. I have never been in the Okaloosa County School Board meeting hall, whatever it's called, but I can see it live. I know exactly what's going on in the Okaloosa County School Board because it's available to me. Something that simple can radically change the parental involvement that we're looking for and wanting and require to keep an informed populace. As Mr. Cunningham said a few minutes ago, it is your responsibility. However, we need to make sure that the environment is as fruitious as possible for you to get that information, and that it is not being in a withheld manner. Not saying that it is now, but it certainly, the parameters are in such a way that it could be taken that way.
And Ms. Carr?
So through this process, I've learned so much information from people out in the audience, from the incumbent school board members, things that I never even knew because it wasn't communicated. I learned that they're considering hiring a public information officer, which I fully support. Kind of like, does anybody follow the Walton County Sheriff's Department on Facebook, Twitter, website, whatever? What if we had that for the school district? What if we couldn't do the video, or maybe if we do it in tandem with the video, why don't we have an infographic that says, we only have 11 teachers to hire to be completely full of completely staffed. Why doesn't it say we have some controversial materials that are going to be discussed in these little, what's the way to say it? The ways that you can consume it, instead of having to go to the agenda or the minutes and figure out how to find all of this information. As I've been doing this for the last couple of months, the amount of time it takes to go find something, and you also have to be in the right browser, and you have to be on a computer, and you have to be, there's so many different ways that so many different restrictions on trying to get this information. So in order to engage the stakeholders or parents, it would be to communicate with them at the school level, communicate within the schools, to teachers could then communicate to their parents, just getting the word out in a timely manner of what needs are there and generally communicating and saying it forever. Sorry, guys.
And sorry, my family just informed me that I must have said incumbents instead of candidates. Sorry, I hope you guys figured that one out on your own.
Obviously.
Moving on to the next question. Ms. Carr, you can set this one off. We live in a world where basic principles have to be written and no longer assumed. What safety measures or policies do you support, if any, to prevent tragedies such as what happened in Loudoun County when a boy entered a girl's bathroom and assaulted her in the bathroom?
Well, I'm sure y'all have been paying attention, but I believe that the governor has taken a lot of this on himself and created policies and procedures statewide so that the state of Florida does not have to deal with a lot of these issues. What was the second part?
The main part of the question is, what safety measures or policies do you support, if any, to prevent tragedies such as what happened in Loudoun County when a boy entered a girl's bathroom and assaulted her in the bathroom?
I support any policy that's going to be followed through on. When I reviewed the policy, 648 pages is the policy book for a school board member. I was reading it, and there are plenty of policies that are in there that, how do we know if they're being followed? So as long as we have the people around to do the checks and balances, to do audits, to just go verify that all these policies and procedures are there, I support a policy to restrict girls from going into boys' bathrooms and boys from going into girls' bathrooms. I also want to say that boys shouldn't be playing girls' sports. Is there a policy on that? So,
Yes.
okay, and Jason will tell you about that in a minute.
Mr. Edens.
Yes, ma'am. Could you repeat the question, please?
What safety measures or policies do you support, if any, to prevent tragedies such as what happened in Loudoun County?
As many as it takes. We currently have policies or procedures in place that prevents that sort of thing in Walton County schools. It has not been an issue for us, and at this point, we're waiting on guidance from the state. Once they finish the litigation with the attorneys to properly word a policy that we would have to vote on within the district.
First of all, I apologize. I shouldn't have interrupted you.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry.
It's a debate. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Mr. Catalano. Yeah, watch the elbows.
It's my arm's not that long. We have policies in place to make sure that our kids are protected, and the governor has done a lot and made sure that this is not, because it has been an issue in school districts nationally. It's been an issue in school districts in Florida. It hasn't been an issue in Walton County. And we're not gonna allow it to become an issue. And this is one of, goes to one of the other questions. Like, this is what the work of the school board is to make sure that our schools are safe, and that that our teachers understand how to function in those scenarios and what they need to do. And we work really hard to make sure that our school hallways are safe, and that our bathrooms are not being abused, and that there's not an environment where that carelessness leads to something that would be tragic. And so but regardless of what the state of Florida says, we're still going to do what's right for kids. We're still going to protect them. We're still going to make sure that boys are using the right bathroom, and that girls are using the right bathroom, and that we don't have issues with our sports, and that we don't have the same issues and the chaos that we see in a lot of school districts, and it's heartbreaking to watch what these communities are going through and what these schools and these children are being exposed to. And I'm grateful that that is not the scenario here in Walton County. And it's not going to be. We have a strong leadership team, we have a strong superintendent, and again, we have a strong community that's involved, and we make sure that our schools reflect who we are as Walton County citizens. And we're going to continue to do that. And I think that's an important part of the reason why we haven't seen those same issues the way that other school districts have seen them. It's because we have a strong leadership, and we have people who are doing what's needed to be done because they put kids first.
Mr. Porter.
I believe that we were all made by a perfect creator, and our perfect creator does not make mistakes. Your gender is no exception to that. Accommodating ideas that there is exceptions to that is not going to do us any favors, particularly as parents. So the way you protect yourself against that is you say no. Right now, I understand that there are state policies that protect our kids from that. However, as much as it pains me to say this, Ron DeSantis is not going to be governor forever. One day, there is going to be changes in state government, and that is, we can't rely on that. We have to put policies at the local level to make sure that your kids are protected and that they are based on absolute moral truth that are not going to change in 5 minutes. Boys and girls have been boys and have been girls for 6,000 years now, and that's not going to change 6,000 years from now. And so creating policy or making accommodations for something other than that is foolhardy and very short-sighted, and that's spiritually speaking and legally speaking. So the way you protect that is you don't accommodate, and you respectfully, and obviously in a Christian way, you respectfully disagree with that, and you put a policy in place to protect the majority, and move on.
Thank you. So then you'll begin our next question. By what metrics should we determine if our schools are succeeding?
That's a great question. So there's two ways you can do that, I guess. One, the way most people, I guess, would do that is based off of state standards, state numbers, state ratios, things of that nature. At the end of the day, I think if your child is earning an education that helps him to become a better U.S. citizen, that is our yardstick for success. I don't necessarily care if they can do Calculus 2. What I do care is that they know the Constitution, they know the Declaration of Independence, they know who George Washington is, they know who Abraham Lincoln is. On top of that, how to change a car tire, how to balance a checkbook. Practical living is not, that's what makes our country tick. It is not, every kid does not have to go work for NASA or get a 4-year degree to mean something to society. So does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Carr.
And I agree with Gordon on some of that, but every kid should be provided the opportunity to get that 4-year degree if they have it in them to do it. So we had a program called Take Stock in Children, the Walton Education Foundation. It offers college scholarships to at-risk children. These are the A, B students that show up, they want to learn, but they don't have the structure at home to help them get to college. So you want to guide some of that to college because they have the brain power, they have the intellect, they have the drive to do it. So I don't want to restrict the kids that need to go to college. So there are multiple ways that you can determine if schools are succeeding. It's so different stages. While they're in school, after they graduate high school, and then after they graduate college. So while they're in school, you can use stats like, does the funding, if you provide extra funding per student, does that mean that the grades are increasing? In most cases, from my research, it's not the funding, okay? It's the parental involvement. Then you can go with ACT, SAT scores. You can gauge that from the juniors and seniors that take the standard exams. You could go on the K-3 reading scores. Right now, Walton County's K-3 reading scores are terrible. So if you went on that metric, we wouldn't be number 3 in the state. There's so many different ways to define success. I hope that every kid in Walton County that wants to go to college can go to college, and I hope that every kid in Walton County that wants to start their career when they graduate high school, that they have the skills and the tools to survive just straight out of graduation.
Mr. Edens.
There are 1,000 ways, 1,000 different metrics you could use to evaluate a school. Currently, we have the state's evaluation process. We're third. The teachers probably are your best judge of a school. When that student comes back to that teacher 10 years down the road and says, if you hadn't have done that for me, or you haven't showed me that, I would not be where I am today. That's the best judgment of any school, any metric, anywhere.
Mr. Catalano?
Yeah, like, there's lots of ways. The state has a grading that they give to school districts. They're looking at overall school grades. They're looking at how our kids have tested on assessments, and we're doing phenomenal. Nobody thought Walton County would be number 3 in the state. We've surprised everyone in the Panhandle. There are counties in the central and southern part of the state, and they're like, how did you guys do this? How did you skyrocket the way you did? And so there's those metrics. But I think that it comes down to is, are we doing what our children need? Are we preparing them for the world ahead of them? We believe that we're teaching the whole child to reach their full potential. Right? It's not just about math. It's not just about reading. We want them to be able to do math. We want them to be able to read. We want them to write and know how to put together information and be able to have public discussion about their issues. We want them to be prepared and well-rounded. But we want them to have options, right? And that's what is so amazing to see when a child who wants to go to college, and then we work with them, and they're able to do it, and they're the first one in their family to go to college and earn a degree, right? That changes a child's life. It changes their trajectory. When a kid says, I just love working with my hands, and so we create a program in which he can earn a certificate in that field, and he graduates high school, and then he can go get a job with experience, right? That changes his life. We're bringing students. We look at our minority students. The state requires us to do an equity check. Like, we see, how are you treating all of your students? This past year alone, we made sure that our minority students are invited into.
Just to be fair.
I'll
Sorry,
talk
you
about
get to
it
go
later.
first on the next one, though. Should a teacher use alternative names or pronouns for students without parental permission?
No.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Catalano.
No. Yes, this is. I mean, look, we gotta be honest with, and we need to be able to understand that we're dealing with children, right? So personally, while I think this is absurd that we're in a place in our society that this is a topic of discussion, the fact is that kids are involved in this, and there are parents that don't see an issue with it, and there are parents in our community that we have kids that are going through this. We've got to make sure that parents are involved. We've got to make sure that we're doing what's right for all of our kids. And we need to make sure that we're not losing these children in the process, right? Someone who, my belief is that there's something broken in them when they're struggling with their identity like this. My heart breaks for them. We can't just push this kid aside and say, no, sorry, you're wrong. That's what they're expecting. They're expecting society to push them away, and that fuels that void that's within them. I mean, we're talking about children who are saying that they want to be something different than what God created them as. Right? We can't just ignore it. We got to make sure that we are protecting them, that we're creating an environment that while they're going through this, that they're not being bullied, that they're not being condemned, and that we work with them, we work with parents to make sure that they're given resources, that they're understanding what needs to be done, because this is a generation, right? This is so much more than just what's happening in school. This is about what's happening in our community, what's happening in our country. Like, we as parents and as community members, as Christians, we have to be involved. Way more than just at school. We've got to be involved in these kids' lives, and we have to have an open
That's
arms
time.
so that they don't feel like they're on their own.
Sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. I just want to be fair to the other candidate.
I know. I'll try to do better. I'm sorry.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, your gender is a sacred gift from God. So to deny that reality is, the whole purpose of education is to instill and teach and have our kids understand absolute truth. That's what education exists for. The word university or univeritas, that means one truth. That's where the word comes from. And so that we're having this discussion on a national level is somewhat shocking to me, but no, I don't think that without parents' permission, a teacher should not be calling a child. Well, frankly, with or without the parents' permission, should the teacher call something, should deny truth. And that's for two reasons. One, it's denying truth, but two, we've seen countless instances, whether that's in university or whether in public high schools or middle schools, whatever the case may be, where a teacher has been fired for not accepting their pronouns or their identity or whatever the case may be because they have denied absolute, or because they were asked to deny absolute truth and they didn't do it. So, again, protecting truth is just as important as serving the parent. And I think those two things are not exclusive. I think they go hand in hand together. But no, absolutely not. I don't think that using a pronoun that is other than the child's actual born pronoun is the right way to go.
Ms. Carr.
So our students spend more of their awake hours at school. So school must be an extension of your home, or you would hope that it would be. The teachers that are there should respect the parental rights. They should respect, everything that is taught is basically reviewed and it comes home, or they get tested on it, or whatever, as far as subjects are concerned, right? Like your math, your science, all that stuff. So if you're called a different pronoun than you would like to be, but your parents aren't on board, and it just gets really, really messy, and it's not, I don't know how to put the right words to this, but I do not believe that without parental consent on pretty much anything, that the teacher should call a student anything other than what they are.
Mr. Edens.
Yes, as a classroom teacher, I call my students by their names. We avoid pronoun use and things of that nature. It should not happen without parental consent.
So you can begin the next question, which is, do you believe in systemic racism? Mr. Edens.
Okay, can you repeat the
Yes.
question, sir?
Do you believe in systemic racism?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Mr. Catalano. Mr. Catalano?
No, I do not. I think the idea of it is faulty. Like even the concept. Because the truth is, and I talked about this earlier, if you read the Declaration of Independence, you can see the truth that's in it. And while it took our country a long time to get to where it is today, the foundation of truth was written in those documents. And it's what laid the framework for us to build on as we went through it generations. And it's heartbreaking to read our history and see where our country came from and what we did. But the truth is that we were founded on truth. And that's what gave us the ability to see the freedom and the liberty that we have for all races. And so I think the idea of systemic racism goes against the very fabric of what our country was founded on. I did better on my time.
Mr. Porter?
I'll be as quick as I can. No, absolutely not. I don't believe in systemic racism. That is an idea that was brought to us by the the wonderful experts at Harvard and Yale and Loyola and all these wonderful universities. To echo what Mr. Catalano just said, if you ever read the original draft, there's two drafts of the Declaration of Independence. The one that we all see was the finalized draft after Franklin and Adams had their take at it. The original draft that Jefferson actually wrote, there's an entire paragraph there. At the second half of the Declaration of Independence, there's a long list of grievances and usurpations where he talks about, the king did this, the king did that. There's an entire paragraph in there where Jefferson, who is now considered this racist, slaveholder, evil guy, he spends an entire paragraph talking about how the king of Great Britain was the racist one because the colonies tried to get rid of slavery multiple times and the king of Great Britain forbade it. So to say that this country is founded on racism or that our systems are by their nature systemically racist is completely false and errant. This country was not, despite what the New York Times tries to tell us, the country was not founded in 1619. Some people, there's debate over if it was 1776. I'm of the opinion it was in 1620. That's whenever the Pilgrims came here and they came to find a place where they could worship God in their own way without any adulteration from the government. It was their idea that all men were created equal, and that came on down to 1776 later on. So no, I do not believe that, and I would encourage you guys to do your own homework on that as well. There's a lot to it.
Ms. Carr.
And I'll be really quick. No, and do you know how hard it is to follow two pastors to answer that question? I think y'all both did a great job.
And Ms. Carr, what are your thoughts on critical race theory, DEI, and SEL?
So, critical race theory has been blocked by the governor, I believe, and it also is, from what I understand in my research that's sitting right here, it generally is taught at the college and doctoral level. Why it is even being questioned and brought up about coming down to the K through 12 space, I do not know. I do not support any of those concepts being taught to children who are still in the care of their parents. I don't know exactly the right way to say that. But.
Mr. Edens.
No, as a classroom teacher, I do not teach those things. Definitely do not teach CRT in my classroom. And the governor has put out policy, directives, procedures, whatever you want to call it, where we don't have to deal with those things, and are suggested not to.
Mr. Catalano.
Yes, even before the governor did that, the CRT was not in Walton County. It's never been part of our curriculum. It's never been taught. It's not something that it was ever an issue for us, and it's not going to be. And this is an attempt it's an attempt in a couple of ways. I think it's an attempt on one side to try to stir up issues that aren't real. Now they were real for some communities, but it's not real for us. It's not an issue for us. And so again, it's another example of how we've done a good job to make sure that our schools are safe and they're protected, and that we're creating an environment where we're not distracted by the chaos of what's around us, and that we are a refuge for our children. It's part of the prayer that I pray before every single meeting, that our schools would be a safe place and a refuge. Those aren't just words. That's part of who we are as a community, and I think it's part of who we are as Walton County. We've created that environment so that our kids are protected from that. And so it's not an issue in our schools.
Could you repeat the question for me?
Yes. What are your thoughts on critical race theory, DEI, and SEL?
Sure. So critical race theory, to say that it's not being taught in K through 12 in instance is false. So you have to go back to what 1619 actually, I'm sorry, not 1619, critical race theory actually is. Critical race theory is a legal theory that basically describes that our systems are systemically racist. That absolutely is being taught from coast to coast. I don't think so much in Ball County by our policy. However, that's something that an individual teacher can just slip in. It's not an entity, or it's not a curriculum that you order from McGraw-Hill. It is a legal theory that started off in our colleges, and I don't know why it's being taught in our public schools. I really don't, because it is wrong. Well, I know exactly why it's being taught, and it's because our enemy right now, as Christian conservatives, they are trying to destroy our country from the inside out. And by the inside out, I mean they're attacking the nuclear family and the fact that our country was built on godliness and the Holy Bible, the King James Version that the founders had. That's what our country was founded upon. So critical race theory, I've got to be honest with you, the other two acronyms I've never even heard of before. The other two, I have to do my homework on that, and I certainly will. But as far as critical race theory as it stands on its own, it absolutely is here, and if it's not in our, and I don't believe it's in our county policies right now, but it very well could be in our classrooms, and we'd have no idea. It's just something that an individual teacher could simply teach. I know I went to Paxton High School, and the ideas were brought forth. Now, while they weren't part of a curriculum or anything like that, they certainly were introduced as something worth considering. So, thank you.
Okay, we have time for a few more questions. Our next question is, what approval process do you believe should be employed when placing books in a public schools library for all students to access?
Is that for me?
Yeah, Mr. Porter.
Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no problem. What approval process do you believe should be employed when placing books in a public schools library for all students to access?
Sure. Well, with anything that's for our public schools consumption, absolutely it needs to go before the duly elected officials that the parents have selected to make sure that what we have in our schools are up to par with what the parent would want. Now, that's not just the school board, that's also the superintendent, who's also an elected official, but that also goes to what can be removed from our curriculum. So, I think the school board and the superintendent does bear some and the administration too. But as far as your duly elected officials, there is certainly a responsibility there to make sure that what we have on the books now is also up to snuff and should be there to begin with. So, as far as the approval process, absolutely it should be a duly elected official that the parents have chosen to go before and make those decisions on behalf of the parent.
Ms. Carr?
I am in support of all reviews and all audits of everything, financial, books, curriculum, all those things. There's actually, again, I've read the 648-page policy document. So item 7, I believe, under section 3, already says that every single thing is reviewed by the school board. But what's clearly falling through is if it weren't for Moms for Liberty, we wouldn't even know that this wasn't reviewed by the school board. It wasn't presented to the school board, and this is very, very much proof that we can have all the policies that we want, but what's going to happen? How can we follow through on all these 648 pages without parental involvement?
Mr. Edens?
Of course, parental involvement needs to be part of that. We have committees in place with students, parents, teachers from other schools, administrators that look at this stuff and then submit it to the board.
Mr. Catalano?
The state legislature passed a new regulation about this, and so this is something that we're working on currently, is making sure that we're in compliance with what the state's requiring. But there's going to be a review, and then once it goes through that committee, it's going to come back to the school board for a final vote at a recommendation from the superintendent. But because I just want to address the class, the paperwork that was presented there was not something that was taught in the general population of our students. It was an opt-in. And yes, I am very appreciative of the Moms of Liberty for bringing this information, because it wasn't something that came in front of the school board. And so once it was brought to light, we dealt with it immediately. But that was an opt-in for parents to say, do you want your kids to go through this class? They had to sign a form and say yes. So there was parent involvement. Every student in that class was only there because their parents wanted them there. And so the information was provided, and I wish that we had known beforehand, absolutely. But as soon as it was brought to our attention, it was dealt with, And that program is not being taught. We don't do it anymore. And that's another example of why it's so important to be involved as a parent. My wife and I, we always chose to opt out of that class, just simply because we didn't feel like that was the place for our school district to be involved in teaching our children. That was something we wanted to do, and that was a personal decision that I made and my wife made for our family. But there are other families, there are other children who don't have that at home, and so they say, we don't know how to talk about this, and so yeah, go through the class. And so we're working on changing the way we do that. If that program, not that program, but if a sex ed class is going to be taught, we want to make sure that we're working with parents, that we can provide them the actual curriculum beforehand, so they can say, hey, yeah, this is something we're okay with, or no, and they don't have to opt their kids into it. But right now, it's not being taught at all, and as soon as we found out about it, we stopped it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so our next question, what correlation do you believe there is between funding and school success?
That's me, right?
Yes.
I forgot the rules.
Mr. Catalano, start this one off.
I mean, obviously we have to have funding, right? You can't operate a school district if you don't have money. But it's not, that is not the way, like if you just throw more money at a problem, that doesn't solve it. And so, yes, we have to have funding. We've done a really good job, I think, of managing and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. When we came into the board, one of the first things we found out about was that our fund balance, which is a requirement of the state of Florida for every school district, was below the minimum, 3%. You have to maintain 3% of your total budget in a fund for emergencies. We were below that. And when we got into doing the audit, we were almost below the very minimum of 1%, where the state comes in and takes over your school district. Thank God we were not, because it gave us the opportunity to really fix some of the issues. Since then, we have completely turned around our school district and our budget. We have now one of the strongest fund balances in the state of Florida for a district our size. We don't have an issue with, we were able to meet the governor's requirement of increasing the starting pay of teachers. We were the first county in the Panhandle to do that. Right? It's not because we raised taxes. We made adjustments. We've been blessed. We have a really strong economy. We have really strong property values, and so it's given us the ability to make these adjustments. But it's only one component. But it's necessary. We got to have money to operate, but it is by no means the answer to everything. That comes by strong leadership, making sure that we're setting children first and making sure that they're at the center of every decision we make. And that's what we've done over the last 8 years while I've been on the board.
Mr. Porter?
So if you look at statistics nationally, and really even worldwide, there is a correlation between funding and educational success, and it's actually the exact opposite of what we've been told it is. Now there is somewhat of a bell curve, but the more that you spend on education, like where it's become an obsession, like the United States has become, you see your numbers drastically start dropping. Some of the most poorly educated districts in the country, for example, Chicago, they are one of the most well-funded districts in the world, and they're doing horribly. If you go look at some of their statistics, it's terrible. Now, as Mr. Catalano said, you have to have funding. However, I would encourage you guys to go look into this and look at the statistics of it. Without fail, the more there's an actual bell curve where you start getting to a certain point, and the funding is actually making the education go down. And they're just literally throwing money on a problem, putting gas on fire. So money is certainly not the answer. In fact, it can be a problem sometimes.
Ms. Carr?
So while I agree with a lot that has been said, funding could help us retain our teachers. It is very expensive to live here, and I've spoken with many teachers along the way throughout the campaign trail over the last couple months, and even in my work with the Walton Education Foundation. There are 2 houses for sale south of the Bay that are under $300,000. 2 today. I think funding could help us with our teachers, and then if we had teachers that were stuck around and were committed to the children, and not that they weren't committed in the first place, but that they were that they got to see these kids go all the way through the school district, and they were there because they didn't have to go get another job, or they didn't have to choose a different profession. one of my son's favorite teachers for math this past fall left to be a flight attendant. We're losing teachers to other professions, and I think that increased funding would help, at least in that area, would help. Also, fundraising at the school level and parental involvement really gets people to buy into schools. They can say that we purchased $50,000 worth of laptops, and every kid, when Jack was at Bay Elementary School, they didn't have enough laptops because the school district didn't have the money. And we were able to buy all new laptops, and all of our kids got to test on the same day, and they got to do all the things that a normal student would do. So I think funding can help bring parents in and help parents that can't possibly be there because of their job or whatever, that they can contribute financially. And I want to say, when I opted into this, it's called Draw the Line, Respect the Line. And you sign up for something and it's called that, you don't really know that it is what all was involved in it. So I trusted the system too much.
Mr. Evans.
Yes, money is not the end-all, be-all. It does help, and it helps short-term. I was the principal of a school in Walton County where we threw money at the problem, and it changed the results. We got better test results, we got better teachers, but it's a short-term fix. I was principal at a school in Okaloosa County where we did not throw money at it. We didn't see any improvement either, but that was based on the quality of teachers that the lack of money could not bring. Your teachers are the end-all, be-all in that scenario. Higher quality teachers, the right kind of teachers, like we have in Walton County, that is the answer to your problem, and that's why we went from 35th to 3rd in the state.
Next question, this is a short one. Where do our rights come from? Mr. Edens.
From God, the laws of man, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, for just a few.
Mr. Catalano.
Yeah, our rights come from God, and we were created in His image and likeness. I thank God that I live in a country that understands that, and that we have a constitution that limits the power of the federal government, and also enumerates some of my rights as an individual. That's not all of them, but there's a few there listed, and I'm glad that they're listed there. But yeah, we live in a country that protects that. But yeah, of course, they come from God as we are created in His image.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, so absolutely, our rights do come from God. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence simply recognize and protect those rights. They certainly do not grant us any. The government has never granted a right in its life. It tries to, and it always ends up in madness, and that's what we're seeing right now, is that happening. So yes, our rights come from God, and shameless plug, if you'd like to know, I have written a class on this, and I've been blessed enough to teach this in several places, but I do teach a class on where our rights come from and how you can find them exactly in the Bible, where God specifically laid those rights out. So if you would like to know more about that, please do see me after.
And Ms. Carr.
I love following Gordon on these. He's the expert on all of this stuff. I'm going to read what I wrote down. Pursuant to our Constitution, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among those being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. While our rights are derived from the Constitution and laws created by our elected representatives, the Constitution is clear that those basic rights from which those rights flow, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, are derived from our Creator.
Ms. Carr, you'll begin, and this will be our very last question. What is your moral standard, and how do you determine between what is right and what is wrong?
I actually love this. This is my favorite question of all of them. So, the way I was raised, my mom always said, follow the golden rule. Do unto others as you would do, oh gosh, I'm not going to mess it up. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Sorry. And I know that comes from the book of Matthew. I grew up Catholic, so I don't know the Bible as well as everybody else. I'm sorry. But my son goes to youth group at our church in Point Washington, and he learns, all these scriptures and stuff. My husband knows all of them. And I'm like, Jack, will you please come home and teach these to me, please? I don't have them all memorized. So anyway, I would say the golden rule is the rule that I live by. My mother made me do that, kind of like how she made me make these fans, and I hope you've all enjoyed them.
Mr. Edens.
Yes. Could you repeat that
Yes.
question, please?
Yes. What is your moral standard, and how do you determine between what is right and what is wrong?
Well, my moral standards, my parents, my church, my family taught me those when I was real young. It's a constant battle, constant watch to keep those in focus. And I struggle and strive to do that every day.
Mr. Catalano.
So, I'm sure this question is probably going to be a little bit different for every single person if you sat down and asked yourself this question. For me personally, I have some amazing parents. They're here tonight, and I was raised in church, and I was raised to have a relationship with God and understand the Bible and read it. And so that's where personally where my moral standard comes from is from the Word of God, my relationship with Jesus Christ. But I understand that in a position, in an elected role, that not every single person believes that. And that I have a responsibility to represent them in the way that honors them, and that I treat them the way that I would want to be treated. I treat them with respect, and I treat them, and now we may disagree on things, but I think what the beautiful thing about if we do this right, and we use the example that Jesus set for us, that we can have differences but still respect each other. We can still work together, and we can still accomplish a lot of really good things. But for me personally, that's where it comes from, and I believe that every decision I make, I hold up against that, and I make sure that I'm making a decision as a representative for the citizens of Walton County. And so, but yeah, that's a little bit of my own personal stand on that and where it came from.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, so my father-in-law has a Bible that I'm very envious of. I think it's big enough that I think it probably depleted the entire Panama rainforest on its own. And it's got enough leather that it probably wiped Texas out for at least a couple of months. But inscribed in the bottom and gilded on the front, it says Final Authority. That, when I saw that, first of all, it scared me whenever I met my wife. But that rings true to me. That is, as far as decision making, whether that's my family, how I raise my son, whether that's how I serve the public, that is my final authority. If the Bible doesn't condone it, I do my best not to do it. And I would agree, it is we're all fallible human beings. It is, I'm sorry, Wes, I keep hitting the table, and I know that's annoying. It is a struggle. However, as a public servant, you are called to make that your focus, to make sure that everything you do can be held to that standard, and try your best to make sure that your life is as close to Christ's example as possible. And while I agree that there are many people that we disagree with, truth is truth, and you can't compromise on that. Truth has always been truth, and it always will be truth. Truth is not something that changes with society. It doesn't change with the winds of the political winds of the United States. Truth has always been truth and always will be truth. And so, I guess to make a short story long, my answer to that is my final authority is the final authority. It is the Bible. And by the way, it was the founder's final authority too. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our candidates. The questions that I did submit these questions to them because I didn't want anyone to accuse Moms for Liberty of being slanted or, showing favoritism or anything. So there were probably about 100 questions on this sheet. I got to as many of them as I possibly could, but we have been here for about an hour and a half, and I know it's the first week of school and you guys are very busy. So I am going to go ahead and wrap it up by saying thank you so much to all of our candidates. Thank you so much to all of you that's here. I appreciate you for coming out, for being engaged, for participating, being informed voters. It's very important. I know your calendar is already marked for August 23rd if you followed instructions and you have a picture of your sample ballot on there as well. Good luck to you all and good luck to you. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the candidate forum. Or move to adjourn. Did I do that right, board members?
My butt hurts. You can't move when you're trying to hold the phone still. It's like
I personal in it again.
it's all right, and it kept cutting off. It would do 10 minutes, and then